One quiet night, Judge Vanessa Carter was pulled over and humiliated by a police officer who hurled venom instead of upholding the law. That officer, Mark Reynolds, carried himself with arrogance, convinced his badge made him untouchable. But fate had a different plan. Weeks later, he found himself standing in Vanessa's courtroom, facing charges and her unflinching gaze. And just wait until you hear how the tables turned and why justice, in the end, struck harder than he ever imagined. The night was calm, the streets almost empty. Judge Vanessa Carter was heading home after visiting her mother, her mind still full of family warmth. She wore jeans, a simple blazer, nothing that marked her as the woman who held authority in one of the highest courts of the state. To anyone passing by, she looked like any other neighbor driving through the quiet suburbs. Then, suddenly, red and blue lights flared in her rearview mirror. Her stomach sank, not because she had done anything wrong, but because of the jolt every driver feels in that moment. She wasn't speeding, she wasn't swerving, there was no reason, and yet here it was, the flashing command to pull over. She eased the car to the side of the road, rolled down her window, and waited. The night air was cool, but tension pricked her skin as the officer approached. Mark Reynolds walked with a swagger, shoulders heavy with arrogance, the kind of confidence that comes not from discipline, but from knowing he could get away with anything. He didn't ask for her license. He didn't even bother with the usual, "Do you know why I stopped you?" Instead, he leaned in close, his voice dripping with disdain. Figures, another black woman who probably stole this car. The words cut through the quiet night like glass shattering on pavement, sharp, unprovoked, meant to wound. Vanessa felt her pulse quicken. For a moment, her hand hesitated near her purse where her ID was tucked away. She wanted to speak, to say who she really was, not just a driver on this road, but a judge who had sworn to uphold the law, someone who could, with a stroke of her pen, decide the fate of men like him. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed still, face calm, voice steady, reaching slowly for her ID. She chose silence, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. She understood power better than he ever could, and right now she saw the trap he was setting for himself. In that moment, one thought echoed in her mind. Let him keep talking. Let him bury himself. The stop stretched on far longer than it should have. The flashing patrol lights painted the street in red and blue, washing over the quiet houses around them. Neighbors' curtains stayed drawn, no one looking out, no one seeing what was happening. It was just her and Reynolds, the silence of the night broken only by his voice, sharp, commanding, always accusing. "Where are you coming from? Whose car is this? Don't play smart with me." Each question carried no curiosity, only suspicion, like he had already written the ending before the story began. Vanessa kept her eyes forward, her hands placed neatly on the steering wheel, as every driver is taught to do. Still, she felt the tremor in her fingertips. It wasn't fear of being caught, she had nothing to hide. It was the sting of humiliation, the helpless frustration of being judged for something she could never change. Inside her, a wave of memory rose. She saw her father, strong, determined, marching shoulder to shoulder with others who had demanded fairness in streets filled with chants and posters. She remembered him telling her, with pride, that he endured so she would not have to, that she would grow into a world where respect was earned, not denied. Now, sitting under the glare of patrol lights, she felt the bitter crack in that promise. And then her thoughts turned to her daughter, a little girl with curious eyes who believed her mother could do anything. A child who carried the innocence of believing the world was fair, because that's what Vanessa wanted her to believe. What would she say if she knew? What would she think if she saw her mother, a judge, sitting silent while a man with a badge spoke down to her as if she were nothing? The ache in her chest was heavier than any words spoken that night. Finally, as if bored with his own game, Reynolds stepped back, his lips twisted in a smirk. "Don't let me catch you again." No citation, no official reason, just dismissal, as though he had proven something. Vanessa pulled away slowly, the patrol car shrinking in her rearview mirror. The silence inside her vehicle was suffocating. No radio, no words, only the sound of her own steady breathing, each inhale a reminder to hold herself together. It wasn't the absence of a ticket that stayed with her. It was the knowledge that, in his eyes, her title, her achievements, her years of service meant nothing. He hadn't seen the judge. He hadn't seen the woman who worked tirelessly for fairness in her courtroom. He had seen only what he wanted to see. And that realization pierced deeper than any insult. As the suburban street slipped by, one question echoed in her mind. How many times had this same story played out, unseen and unheard, for others who had no bench to sit on, no robe to wear, no voice to fight back? She gripped the wheel tighter. The humiliation lingered like a shadow, but so did something else. A seed of resolve, buried under the pain, waiting for the right moment to rise. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was in full session. The tall windows let in narrow streams of morning light, illuminating the bench where Judge Vanessa Carter sat, her black robe falling neatly over her shoulders. She held the gavel within reach, her face calm and unreadable, the mask of authority she had perfected over years on the bench. The clerk read the docket. State of Franklin versus Officer Mark Reynolds. The name hit her like a thunderbolt. Her pulse quickened, though she kept her face still. She leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. Could it be the same man? The same voice that had pierced the quiet of that suburban street? And then he walked in. Mark Reynolds. His uniform pressed, his chin raised high, his stride filled with the same swagger she remembered from that night. Only now, instead of prowling around a car window, he was standing before her courtroom, facing charges of excessive force and abusive conduct in another case. He looked confident, even smug, as though certain that the system would protect him, as though justice had always bent to shield him. He hadn't recognized her, not yet. The defense attorney rose, adjusting his tie, and began with smooth words. Officer Reynolds has served this community with dedication. He is a respected officer, misunderstood in a moment of high pressure. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Each polished excuse struck her like sparks landing on dry grass, igniting the fire already burning in her chest. She remembered the smirk on Reynolds' face, the way he had dismissed her, the venom in his voice when he spat his slur, his absolute certainty that nothing he said or did would ever come back to him. Her fingers brushed lightly against the gavel. She did not strike it, not yet. Then came the turn. The prosecutor wheeled out a monitor and announced the next piece of evidence, dashcam footage from one of Reynolds' recent stops. The screen flickered to life. The courtroom filled into silence. And then, there he was. Officer Reynolds, on camera, hurling the same words she had heard that night. The same tone, the same contempt, almost the same sentence, as if it were his habit. A ripple went through the room. Gasps, whispers, the shifting of bodies in seats. Everyone had heard it. Everyone had seen the disdain on his face, the casual cruelty in his voice. Reynolds froze. For the first time, the mask of arrogance cracked. His eyes darted around the courtroom, and then, slowly, almost unwillingly, they lifted to the bench. And in that instant, recognition dawned. His posture faltered, the smirk vanished. He knew. He finally realized that the woman he had humiliated on that quiet suburban street was the very judge now presiding over his fate. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, but the fire in Vanessa's chest blazed hotter than ever. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, charged like a storm about to break. Every eye was fixed on the bench, every ear strained for the next word. Officer Mark Reynolds sat stiff at the defendant's table, his confidence gone, his face pale. Recognition had struck him like a blow, the realization that the woman he had mocked and degraded was the one now holding his future in her hands. Judge Vanessa Carter leaned forward slightly. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes carried the kind of steel that cuts deeper than any shout. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, each word precise, echoing through the chamber. Officer Reynolds, this court does not bend for arrogance. It does not excuse contempt hidden behind a badge. You swore to serve and protect, but instead you chose to belittle, to demean, and to abuse that trust. And today, accountability has arrived. Her words were calm, almost too calm, yet the razor edge beneath them made the silence in the room unbearable. The defense attorney shifted uneasily in his seat. The prosecutor remained still, knowing there was nothing more to add. The gallery watched with wide eyes, breath held. Vanessa lifted her gavel, but paused for one final line. In this courtroom, justice is not a suggestion. It is the law. The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. The ruling came swift and uncompromising. Suspension without pay, referral to internal affairs, and mandatory civil rights retraining before he could ever consider returning to duty. For Reynolds, it was more than punishment. It was the shattering of the shield he thought would protect him forever. His reputation, his authority, his unchecked power, stripped away in a single verdict. But for the courtroom, it was something larger. It was a message. A reminder that no uniform, no title, no arrogance stood above accountability. As the echoes of the gavel faded, Vanessa allowed herself a quiet breath. It was not joy she felt, not even relief, but something deeper: vindication. Not only for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced, every citizen dismissed, every person who had felt powerless against someone hiding behind authority. The gallery sat in reverent silence, and for those who would hear this story beyond the courtroom walls, the feeling would be the same: a powerful certainty, undeniable and unshakable. Justice had spoken.